Welcome to the Art of Patient Communication. I am Dr. Kritika Mehra. And in this podcast, we will be talking about all the communication skills that you need to have a good relationship with your patient. Because the relationship with your patient is only as good as your ability to communicate with them. And on today's episode, we will be talking about authenticity. Hi, my name is Dr. Kritika Mehra. I have brought up in India, and I studied in the western part of India in Pune. And I came to Australia in 2007 after I finished my graduation in 2006 as a dentist. And then I went through the whole journey of doing my Australian Dental Council examinations, which is almost about 2 years, before I started working in the public sector in 2009, which was in regional Victoria. In 2009 also, I ended up working in the private sector in regional New South Wales in Deniliquin, which is a small town with about 8,000 population. I must say, looking back, my journey was quite steep, not just the clinical journey, but also the journey as an individual, because there's a whole different way we are brought up back in India. The whole cultures, beliefs, they're completely different as to Western countries. And I think as a clinician, if I was to point out, the main difference is the client that we are facing. So the client that we are facing in Western countries are a lot more empowered. They know a lot more and they want to know a lot more from you. And there's always a fear of missing the information out, that did I cover that? Did I say that? Did I warn about this? So all of that is extremely important. And it's interesting, it's actually proven by the point that every time we go back to India, all our friends who are dentists in India, they would be like, how is the life there? We've heard so much about litigation. And, one of them would always ask like, वहाँ पे सब लोग सू कर देते हैं क्या? Which translates to like, are patients forever suing you right, left and center? Which is not the case, but there is a fear. And whether you are a new graduate or you are overseas trained graduate, we all live in a fear of a patient complaint. And I won't say that 15 years in, I don't fear that. I fear that. And I think to some degree, it's a healthy fear. You need that to perform well. And so you still remember the duty of care that you have, but you don't want to perform under fear all the time. It is quite stressful and can lead to burnout. So just to talk about the fear, the fear could be in the form of patient complaints to your principal dentist, or they put a negative Google review, which is quite a bit in recent times, or they may even complain to a body like your registering body like APRA in Australia. So yeah, these fears do not leave our side, but there is a solution for it. So how do we actually manage this fear? I'll just take you all back to the first chapter that we read in our medical college books. The first chapter that was titled as Patient Rapport. I think we forget that establishing patient rapport plays a very important part in our relationship with the patient, or how our journey with the patient is going to pan out. And the patient rapport only comes through us listening to the patient and patient feeling heard at the end of the day. Most of the time when you will see the patient, they will actually tell you what their expectations are, what they want, or if not, you can actually read the patient's body language and try to understand where they are at and meet them there. The problems only come when we don't listen to them because we are stuck in our head with the targets that we have to meet, or we are too focused on trying to find the treatment that we have learned or we've done a training course for over the weekend. That's where the mismatch happens. And I think over my years of experience, what I've nutted out is that this all understanding the patient rapport building, all of that falls under patient communication. Just one word, communication. That communication word could actually go as deep as into your patient communication, your relationship with your patient, with your team members, or with your employer, with everything. And that could have a huge role to play in your career or in shaping your career. I'll try to explain you metaphorically how seeing a patient day to day looks like to me. I look at going into a surgery room or into a clinical room before I talk to the patient as a theater. So I look at it that I'm going to go on a stage and I have all my scripts in my hand. And as my experience is going to get better and more every single day, I am going to become more and more script rich. Okay, so now all I have to do is go in the room, just adapt my script to that particular patient or the personality that I am dealing with or the situation. I just have to say my dialogues. That's all. There is nothing more, nothing less to that. And as you will get more experienced in the field you are working in, you will have a lot of scripts in your hip pocket. The learning will never finish. It's always going to be a work in progress, but I promise you that it will get better. So the point that I'm trying to make is that your relationship could be good, bad, or excellent with the patient, but that is directly proportional to your ability to communicate with the patient. The better the communication, the better your journey with the patient. I may sound like that I know it all. I have done it all. No, it's actually work in progress, as I said before. I'd like to share one of my stories with you, one of my patients, which it was life-changing for me. It made me a better clinician, that's one. And I've been more aware of my words because it really made me think. So one of my patients in my early days of the clinic ownership, which means that I had two pressures on me or two hats on me. One is the new clinic owner hat, and the second hat is being a dentist hat, right? So, the more balls you're juggling, the more pressure you go through. And so let's name this patient Fiona. So in this new clinic ownership, Fiona is booked in my appointment book and she's going to come for a treatment today. And she needed a filling on the lower left-hand side. In dental terminology, I would say it was a 3-5 buckle that I will never forget. So buckle means it's the filling on the out towards the cheek. And so the patient is booked in. She was about to come around, I think, 2 p.m. that day. And in most medical practices, or you would know that how if there is a patient who is red flagged, whether they are a difficult patient or they are a nervous patient or anything about them, they will be flagged and the team will actually pass that message to you. So I was told in the morning that Fiona is coming and she's actually a very difficult patient. So just make sure that, you eat your lunch properly and, stuff like that. And I said, okay, sure, no worries. So patient comes in at 2:00. There's another thing. As a clinic owner, as a new owner, you always try to impress every single patient who's coming through the door. You want to be on your A game. You think I have to please every single person. So that's and you exhaust yourself, which I had done that. I had exhausted myself because of those two hats. Anyway, so I'll go back to the story. So she comes back at 2 p.m. She comes in and, we number up as usual. And I started doing the filling. So in dentistry, when we are actually doing a particular procedure, so the dentist has a handpiece, which is the drill, the high speed, and the dental assistant has a suction where she's retracting and taking the water away at the same time. So the way I like to explain that is like there is a little choreography or a dance between that handpiece and the suction when it's in the patient's mouth and we are performing the procedure. And that has to go really well because you're relying on each other. That dance went wrong with that patient and it was on the corner of the lip and my drill got stuck into the patient's lip, had a little nick in it and the lip started bleeding. So I panicked, which we all would, but I managed the situation clinically really well. I stopped the procedure, I controlled the bleeding, I did the sutures, I finished the filling, I did all that, and then I sat the patient up. One information that I want to tell about the patient is that this particular patient, Fiona, she has these involuntary movements of the face that she does, but she's not aware of it. But I can see it as a clinician. I don't have many patients who does that, but Fiona did have that. And that was making the whole dance a little bit awkward as well. Anyway, so I sat the patient up and I apologized to the patient. I explained to the patient what had exactly happened, which is I was perfectly right until that point, until I said to her that it actually happened because of your involuntary face movements. And straight away, the patient just looked at me and she said, well, I have never had these things happen in the past. I have had so many fillings done and nobody has actually ever said that to me. I was actually completely speechless. I was just listening to her and she's like, you could have put a cotton roll right there so this didn't happen, but obviously you didn't. And she got quite upset and she just kept saying how she's going to be now bruised because she's very easy to bruise. And I was extremely stressed. I just had no words, absolutely no idea how am I going to handle this. And I just said to her, Fiona, look, I apologize and I'll just give you a call tomorrow because frankly speaking, I'd actually dug a hole for myself. I just didn't know how to get myself out of that. After that, I finished the rest of my day and I went home and I called a couple of my colleagues up, which is extremely important again to call some of your friends, who are in the same industry. Anyway, so that's what I did. So I called one of my friends up and then they said to me, Kritika, you did everything right, but unfortunately you blamed the patient for the mistake. You should have said, I apologize. And these things happen. And maybe I should have said what I said to you at the start, that there is a dance that happens between the dental assistant and the dentist. And unfortunately, that dance got disrupted in your case when I was doing the filling. And that's where I should have stopped. So now it was the time where I was like, right, how am I going to go back and fix this? So this is where I wore the big girl pants. And next day morning, I went to work and I thought, yep, I'm going to call up Fiona. So I called up Fiona. So that was obviously like a TLC call. I called her up of how she was going. And I also told myself that I'm going to listen, not say much. And she told me how she's very bruised and how her lip is very sore. And obviously she was very unhappy with what had happened. And after she had told me how she was feeling, I apologized again. And this time I actually explained her the choreography that happened on the phone. And she understood. And she stopped and she was satisfied and she said, look, Kritika, I'll come in and see you next week when I feel a little bit better. And 14 years down the track, she's still my patient and she only likes to see me and no one else because I was honest. It took me 24 hours to realize, but I did go back to her. And I think that's the only learning from this episode is that be authentic. Do not hesitate to pick up the phone and apologize to the patient because we are humans. We are not God. We can make mistakes and it's okay to make mistakes. We get into trouble when we don't accept what has happened. That's all. So accept it. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of it. Follow me on Instagram and don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. See you.